This episode of Rewired is supported by Neuroni. Over 20 years of experience and more than 500 companies served, Neuroni helps companies grow faster with AI tailored to their business and embedded into real workflows that deliver measurable value. Neuroni helps teams reduce friction, improve decision-making, and scale with confidence.
Are you still Googling things or not?
90% of the things that I was Googling previously, I'm researching now.
If there's one thing that you can do to increase your visibility, create a Wikipedia page. It's free. How can you influence, if you want, the buyer's actions? Depending on who your target customer is and what type of LLM they're using and so on, location and right, the way you optimize is going to be quite different.
Welcome back to the Rewired podcast. Today we are talking about what happens when people stop discovering companies through websites and start meeting them through AI conversations. Our guest is Bogdan, co-founder and CPO at Genezio. Bogdan has been building heavy automation systems for a very long time already. Today, he is focused on a new layer of that challenge: how AI systems learn about brands and how they talk about them in real conversations.
Rewired. Raw, real, unfiltered.
Okay. So, Emil, I just want to ask you something before we actually introduce our guest. Are you still Googling things or not?
90% of the things that I was Googling previously, I'm researching now.
What do you mean researching?
By researching meaning that I'm going into Claude and I'm discussing with my assistant called Claude about how I can get that particular thing done or how can I get that particular thing resolved.
Oh, interesting.
Instead of Googling, because in order to achieve the same result, I would be Googling 5 things, 7 things, and in order to reach a conclusion.
All right. I'm still Googling some things. But maybe our guest from today, Bogdan, will help me at least understand, should I still Google or not. But first of all, welcome. And thank you very much for accepting our invitation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Before I'll jump into the technical details that you guys anyway started before we start recording, I just want to ask if you can tell me, who is Bogdan? What's his main driver? Why does he do what he do?
So I'm just a guy from a small city in Romania that is known not for anything related to IT, but mostly bad things. And I'm by nature, I'm very curious. And I think that's probably the number one thing that drives me. Whenever there's a new piece of technology, whenever there's something that I can play with, I tend to take the time and actually do that. And that's my learning recipe. This is how I learn things. And I'm definitely a builder. I like to build things, anything, name a problem, I'll build a product around it, even though it's going to be used just once. It's just for the fun of it.
If you go back, just picking on this last sentence that you gave me, one of the things you solved but give you the most learning. Do you remember what was that?
It's probably one of my not biggest projects, personal projects, but the one that took the most amount of time and the one that I had to rewrite probably at least 3 times. It's around home automation project.
Okay.
You didn't.
So you took it seriously.
Yeah. I had the product requirements written by my wife were very, very specific. So I had to put a lot of thought into it. But now it works. It's fully, working end to end. And it hasn't failed in a long time, which is
well done.
Yeah, for home automation projects.
And with a client that difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe it was an agile project with 2 week sprints.
More like daily. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what are you doing today?
So today I'm a co-founder at a company called Genezio. And what we do is that we help companies be present in the conversations that people have with LLMs like ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, AI Overview, and so on. So whenever somebody goes, like you were saying, when you go and have a conversation with Claude, maybe you want to, I don't know, buy some glasses, and you want to have a conversation around that. If your company is selling glasses, how do you make sure that you're visible in that conversation? How do you make sure that you're mentioned? And how can you influence, if you want, the buyer's actions?
So, in order for me to understand, do you measure how well am I positioned, or do you also influence how well am I positioned?
So we definitely measure how you're positioned, right? And we apply a lot of science, believe it or not, into that. It's not that easy. Saying something like, you're part of 60% of the conversations. Well, it's more complicated than that. So we measure that. We then understand exactly how the LLMs are coming to those conclusions. How do they form their thoughts, and where do they get their information from? Whether it's from their long-term memory or their shorter-term memory, meaning going online and doing research as the question is being answered. And then we analyze how that happens and give you insights, what we call actionable insights, on what you can do so that you're more visible.
Like, you would need to put an article on this particular resource with this particular title in order for you to rank better.
Yes, and we even go as far as saying, and here's an example of such an article that would respond to those specific query fanouts that the LLMs are launching while having that conversation on this specific topic for a certain customer profile that you want to target. So we go from, even like creating a brief. If you work with an agency, with a content agency, and they write the content, we could create the brief so that you give it to the content agency, so that when they write the article, they take into account those queries, those topics, those user personas, and so on. And then it has a higher chance of influencing such results in the future.
So I know that there is a difference between the way search engine worked, which were relatively deterministic if you are considering all the variables of your location and everything, versus large language models that are non-deterministic.
Yeah.
How non-deterministic are they? Like, how much is the variation, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah. So you mentioned location. I think location and language are probably two of the most important items. If I launch the same prompt on ChatGPT from France and from the UK, I will see different answers, even though I use English both times. Right?
Would it trigger different searches?
Yes, as well. Yes, definitely. And the language of the search, the queries is going to be different. The actual searches are going to be different. Even like we did some research, and we started doing a lot of research in this space actually. But one of the research that we did was around the queries that they use when they search the internet in order to answer a question, right? Those are called query fanouts. And if you take Perplexity versus ChatGPT and try to look at how does Perplexity do the search versus how does ChatGPT do the search, is widely different, right? So depending on who your target customer is and what type of LLM they're using and so on, location and right, the way you optimize is going to be quite different. Another big difference is if they search via the user interface. So if I go to chatgpt.com and type in a prompt versus if I go through the API and do the same thing. Again, The queries are going to be very different. The type of websites that they're crawling are going to be very different, and so on.
Even if you are using the same model on both API and
same model. Obviously, the system prompt is different. Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And the tools that they have access to are different. Like both of them have access to the web tool, but the way they use it is actually different. We know that from the research that we've done. It is different. So depending on what you want to optimize, where you point, that's where you want to go. Now, in terms of to your initial question around how predictable those are.
Yeah.
I mean, anyone can do that, right? You open up Perplexity, you type in something, you open it up again, you type the same thing, you're going to see a slightly different answer, right? So it tries to be they try to be as neutral as possible, surface a lot of content, don't necessarily make recommendations, and each time you ask, you might get slightly different answers. That's why you need to ask the same thing over and over again multiple times so that you do get some statistical relevance. If I go and ask once and I say, which bank in the UK do you recommend for business accounts? And it's going to say, I don't know, NatWest, right? The next time I'm going to ask is probably not going to be that. But maybe 80% of the time is going to be NatWest. Or maybe 20% of the time, and just happened to be the first response that it gave me. So that's why you need to run this over and over again. And even more, the way those questions are asked, they have to be as humanly as possible. Meaning that if I go to both of you and I tell you, go do some research around this microphone on ChatGPT, the way you're going to drive the conversation is going to be slightly different. Maybe you're going to end up at
totally different results.
Maybe different results as well, but the way you ask the question is going to be different. You might start from the brand name, you might start from the shape, it depends how you start the conversation. And also a lot of these conversations are what we call multi-turn, meaning that nobody's going to go to Claude and say, I want to buy a German car, what do you recommend? It's going to say Audi. Oh, okay, I'm going to go buy an Audi. It's never
Simpsons. That is Simpson.
Yeah. It's never that simple. A lot of the time, you have a lot of back and forth conversations. What about this? What about that? Well, I value this particular thing. Maybe I want to make sure it has ventilated seats because I live in Dubai.
So it's much more contextual than previous type of searches.
Yes.
So context is much more relevant.
Yes, definitely. Yeah.
So right now there are multiple players on the market that were previously working in the SEO space, CMOs, whatever, Ahrefs, and they're all offering packages that are doing.
Yes.
They are saying that they are doing this. Yeah.
Similar things. Totally. Yeah.
What is your differentiator towards them?
Quite a few. So I mentioned well, in one word, it would be the fact that we run these scenarios and these conversations very close to what a human would, to the way a human would run them. And we give results that are therefore going to be meaningful for the target customers that you have. So we have the concept of personas, which are your customer profiles, right? We run from various locations in the world to try to mimic that exact thing that we talked about earlier, right? Multilingual, obviously. We have this concept of multi-turn conversations. So we don't just spit a whole, large prompt.
Yeah.
From the get-go and then expect the result and that's it. We go back and forth. We have judges that analyze the conversation to understand, did it reach a conclusion or not? And if not, let's continue. Let's ask follow-up questions, right? Like a human would again. Do. Yeah. All of that, if you take all of that and we also have multiple types of conversations. Sometimes you're just you're looking for a recommendation. Once you get 3-4 companies that are being recommended, maybe then you want to compare them. How does the iPhone compare to the Android when it comes to, I don't know, camera, number of megapixels, right? On the camera. It's just a random example.
Yeah.
So you run those type of queries, which from an AI visibility perspective, they don't really make sense because if I already said Apple and Android, it's definitely going to talk about Apple.
Yeah.
And if I'm Apple, right, it's not 100% because when I'm doing product comparison, I'm looking at different things.
It's a totally different subject matter, in fact.
Yes, yeah. And we also have what we call branded questions. Branded questions is when you ask the LLM about yourself. What do you think about Allianz as an insurance company when it comes to the time it takes for them to pay you back? Okay. So if you're Allianz, people ask those type of questions. From an AI visibility perspective, it makes no sense because yes, you're going to be mentioned, but the question is
quality-wise.
Exactly. So what statements, what information does it have, and where did it get it from?
How are you qualified, in fact?
Yes. Yeah.
I'm curious about the thing. Have you observed? So, starting from the example that you just said about Allianz and about their behavior in a certain case, is there divergence in the way it's answering, or it's a constant? So if it says Allianz is 80% good in paying back, whatever, yeah? Is it constant in that? Constant meaning during a set interval, during the same day, or you will be having widely different responses?
Not widely different. It's all about statistics.
Yeah.
Right? So if it's 80% good, my expectation would be that 80% of the replies to be that yes, it's good.
Gravitating around that value.
Yeah.
Okay.
So if you ask a large enough number of, it's like,
toss coins,
Yeah.
coin tosses.
Coin tosses, yeah. It's what we learned in high school as well, right? You take an epsilon, and if you want the error to be as small as possible, you have to run a large number of experiments. It's the same thing here because it's probabilistic. I mean, these neural networks, that's how they work. They're very, very the next token, it's not always the same one. It's always probabilistic, right? So if it's 90%, it should be A. Then maybe 90% of the cases it will be, right? But then 10% is going to be something else, something different. And that's, you've seen the A/B testing that like ChatGPT runs, right? It gives you two answers. Which ones do you prefer? Why do they do that?
In order to train their models.
To train their models, exactly. Because now they have a signal. Now they know this. It's better to go this route or to use this submodel than that submodel, because the new multimodal architectures allow you to
do that.
Turn off parts of the neural net so that it's more efficient. Yeah.
So I'm a small company. Yeah, I'm a small company, software development.
Okay.
How much would it cost me to use this service?
So if you're a small company,
I'm not fit for the service.
No. You are, but you have to define your niche very well. Because if I go to ChatGPT and say, I'm looking for a developer in Romania, do you want to show up or not?
No.
Well, ideally, yes.
Yeah.
but the chances for you to show up are close to 0%.
Okay.
Right? In terms of pricing, I think we started about 200 euros per month. And then this allows you to run a number of queries. We run them on a daily basis so that you can see variation. Yes, we talked about volumes. You need volume to know the answer. We even, an interesting story. One customer that we talked to, he was like, "But I already know I'm number one. I already know, I'm very visible." Like, how do you know? Well, I ran a search on ChatGPT and yeah, but ChatGPT has memory. It knows that you work for this company. Obviously, it's going to talk about this company because right? Plus, you only ran the query once. How do you know that the second time is not going to be different, right? So, yeah, that's why you need this level of volumes and this memory-less, memory-free type environment where you can test in a controlled environment. Yeah.
So practically, for a small company, it can start monitoring and also targeting increases in positioning in large language models with 200 euro per month.
Yeah. And we have a 7-day free trial. So if you go to genezio.com right now,
Hint. Yeah.
Then you can create an account, create your brand. We automatically generate personas, industry description, topics, scenarios. All of that is going to be automatically generated. Basically started from your brand name on your brand website. That's all we need.
So this would include also the insights that you are talking about.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay, so practically I would know, okay, these are your targets. You need to get articles in these areas and about the subjects.
Yeah. And it depends. I mean, some customers, they like to dive into the data all the way down to the, finest detail. And in this case, the finest detail is the conversation itself. I want to see a conversation. I want to see what responses did we get. I want to see what was extracted from this conversation, right? The queries, the citations, the sources, the web pages that were used, right? And it's not just about content, writing content. It's also about, if I'm doing research, if my brand is, I don't know, I'm a car manufacturer, right? And if I monitor that space, I want to understand what are the most cited websites, what are the most cited sources, right? And one great example is that LLMs love Wikipedia. They love Wikipedia.
Really?
Probably 99% of the companies don't have a Wikipedia page.
Nice insight.
So that's like, if there's one thing that you can do to increase your visibility, create a Wikipedia page. It's free.
Why do they love Wikipedia?
Because it's source of truth. It's perceived as such.
I'm going to ask it. No worry.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, why did it used to love Reddit so much? Because it was very structured information, question, answer, right? Stack Overflow, question, answer, right? So that's easy to ingest into a large language model. Wikipedia is structured information.
Yeah.
It's very structured. I mean, when I look at a city in Wikipedia, whether I look at London or Berlin,
Have the same
it's
structure.
going to be more or less the same structure.
It is curated.
And
in
it is
principle.
curated, yeah. And there's no extra, there's little noise, right? When you look at a Wikipedia page. And the LLMs love noiseless data.
Environments and data.
Yeah.
So I've observed a tendency, and that is, previously talking with people and having debates, nobody was invoking an argument like, I've seen it on Google, so it must be true.
Okay.
But today, I'm getting more and more the assumption of truth. I've discussed with GPT. It said it like this. It's clearly
So
true.
it must be true.
It must be true. And for me, it's like brain boggling. Yeah. I'm curious, how do you feel this? Have you felt the same thing? How do you position? And you are the best person to know how much is true about that truthfulness factor.
Well, first of all, let's break this down. So how much is true? Before GPT 4.0, which was like end of 2023.
Yeah,
24,
something like this.
yeah.
24.
Anyway, so before that, the LLMs did not have access to real-time information, right? So you would go to GPT 3.5, you would ask it something, and it would make things up.
Yeah, and it would tell you things.
And in a
2
way
years
that
ago.
they're very credible. So you look at it, but of course, it makes total sense, right?
Yeah.
And I think, this level of hallucination, I think people still have that memory. We still remember those days where it was hallucinating a lot. So we say, oh, but it's hallucinating a lot even today. That's not entirely true. I think that the second the LLMs got access to real world, real-time data, whether it's weather data, you ask it about what's the situation in Ukraine. I remember I actually asked that question and it knew nothing about it back then. Now, if I ask it for something, I asked it earlier today, tell me about Moldbook, the new social network for AI agents, right? It knew right away exactly what it was, how it worked, and everything. How does it do that? It goes online, it gets information, loads its memory with the information, and then spits an answer, right? And the answer is going to be a lot closer to what we call true, right? Now, whether things on the internet are true or not, that's debatable.
Not a debate.
Always.
Yeah, but that's how that works. Now, why do people trust LLMs more than Google? I think a few things. First of all, Google, I remember the day when ads on google.com were on the right side in a panel, right?
I remember
And
that as
everything
well.
in the middle were,
True.
true.
To a point.
Unpaid
Exactly.
websites, right? And that was very clear. Google then started moving the ads from the right side in the middle of
Step
the
by step.
conversation, step by step, yeah. And now they're right there. So, just judging from a purely psychological standpoint, me as a person, I look at that and I know that they're trying to sell me something. So my barrier of my attention span is here because I want to make sure that I don't click the wrong thing. I want to make sure that I
And you still end up clicking the wrong thing
Yeah.
at some point.
yeah. Now LLMs are conversational. When they're conversational, I think people associate the LLMs more with because of our social
yeah.
and exactly, and how our brain was developed. People associate that more with a person, with a human, with somebody with a friend, even, right? I'm sure that if you ask people, is ChatGPT friendly, yes or no, a lot of people will say definitely.
It will rate very high.
I mean, look at the Claude ads.
Yeah.
And that's why I think our barrier of attention is much lower when that happens. So we tend to believe, when it's put in such a nice form, we tend to believe more of what it is telling us. And chances are that it is actually true nowadays. Again, it didn't used to, but now it kind of is. And again, what is truth? From an LLM perspective, truth is more like 50+% of the people on the internet say this color is red, so it must be red. It's like the swarm of agents on Moltbook. Same thing is happening there, right? They have a voting, this
Voting mechanism.
There's some kind of a voting mechanism, yes. So,
Yeah. I think they were recently voting for getting end-to-end encryption in their communication. On Moltbook.
Yeah. I think we need to go back to Asimov's laws and reread those books.
They are not implemented yet, nowhere.
It started. I think they are starting. They have the whole lobster cult, and part of that is there. But I think the Asimov laws is something that we definitely need to take a second, third as a
baseline.
Now,
also, if you're looking into Asimov, even with the laws very well put in place, there are still so many exceptions that hurts. So considering our position today where we do not have the rules put in place.
we're definitely in the middle of a huge transition.
Yeah.
And we're lucky to live it.
Very, very lucky.
Yeah.
So going back to the discussions around, the company that can use your services, and as you said, it's very good that you have to define the persona. So, and also you said to Emil, you need to know who your target is. Who is your target as a company? Who's your personas?
There's two different customer profiles for us. One is a marketing agency that maybe traditionally they did a lot of SEO, so they understand the space. They already have a number of customers, and for them it's an opportunity to upsell those customers, to give them access to some new services. Obviously, the existing SEO tools, they do start to offer these capabilities. The feedback that we've received so far is that we're different enough, and the quality of the data that we're providing is so much better than we're worth at least taking a look at. And then once you put your hand on our product, I believe that we can win from there.
That's a very nice feedback.
Yeah.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah. So that's one, and then you have the marketing team within certain companies. There's larger companies that have their own marketing departments, and they want to be able to run this type of this type of analysis themselves. This being said, we are working with some of the biggest agencies, at least here locally. And what's funny is that they do give them access they give access to their customers to a read-only version of our platform. And we have that capability, obviously, so they can actually come and do the research themselves if that's what they want to do. And this will get them a lot more credibility.
And how do you assess the level of readiness? Maybe the level of readiness is not the right word, but the appetite for the marketing departments, not about agencies, to actually look into training LMS. How much awareness is there about it? I have to do this.
I think we are in the middle of a transition. There are companies that are very much aware and into all of this. There are companies that know nothing about what's happening, and this wave is going to hit them at some point, and whether you're ready or not, that's to be seen.
The water is still coming.
Yeah. I've been at a conference a couple of weeks ago in London, and there were some big companies. And from the audience, I think one of the speakers asked, who knows what AGI stands for? And about 40% of them did not even know what that means. So that's the baseline.
That's the baseline. Yeah.
It's low. But, I have another example. This agency, actually, that we were talking to, they have a customer somewhere in Switzerland, and they're selling some physical products from their website. And they were telling me that, or us, not me directly, they were telling us that the conversion rate from unique website visitor to customer on their website is somewhere around 1%. So 1% of their visitors, they can convert to be a customer, which is great. But when they double clicked on that metric and put some filters on it to understand, well, what about those who come from LLM conversations? When you click a link in ChatGPT, it gets you to the website, but then there's, at the end of the URL, there's like a question mark, UTM source equals chatgpt.com. It's always there because that's for tracking to know, where you came from. So when you filter for that, the conversion rates on their websites were as high as 5%.
Which is huge for anybody who has an incline into this. It's huge.
But that goes back to your point. Who do we trust? Do you when you have a discussion with Perplexity, and it tells you, after a longer conversation, it ends up with, okay, I think this is the product that's right for you. Obviously you're a lot more likely to buy that product because you already did all that research, and then you click on that link, and then you end up on that page. And I don't know if we're going to talk about ads or not, but that's a completely different.
And
I have a question on that.
And this is also not taking under consideration the non-attributed buys, that because people research online and are not clicking on the spot on that particular link, but they are influencing
3
the
days
decision.
later, they go in the
later.
store and they see the brand. And
that is, I think that is huge. Also, I would like to complete on the thing that you said about AGI at the conference. So I've started recently, put it under brackets, teaching some courses on AI for C-levels in large organizations. And I put under brackets teaching because it's more about sharing. So the realization that I have is that a lot of the things that we can show today, they appear as magic. From the yesterday standards, they are purely magic. Yeah. So the reactions are mind-boggling.
Yeah.
Sorry, I felt the need to.
No, it's true. Because it is magic. Like the first time I used Notebook LM to create a podcast, right? You know about this capability, the audio overviews, right? I literally got shivers on my spine. I mean, it was one of those moments where I was like, oh my God, what's happening? Is this real? Yeah. And you can do anything.
Regarding those, that today you can press also the button and enter with them in communication while they're in the podcast. It's like...
Well, the last podcast that I created, I gave it all your episodes,
Yeah.
and it got the transcripts. And then I told it, I'm going to be interviewed here. Let's have a discussion about that. And it created a 12 minutes podcast about how to prepare for this interview.
Nice.
the hell?
Can you share it with me?
Yeah, I will share it with you.
Did I look good on that?
We'll see. Yeah.
You were dropping the element related to ad, and I just want to give a story from yesterday. So yesterday I have a very nice group of friends that we are WhatsApping, and we are WhatsApping from different things. But yesterday we were sending the Super Bowl commercial,
Yeah. the Claude one.
Claude and ChatGPT, and we were laughing. And then one of our friends from there, who was also a guest here, said like, that's really strange. I mean, to talk about not existing ads in AI, that's a little like, I don't know, maybe not appropriate. So I just want to see how you guys see ads in AI.
I mean, if you read what OpenAI said about, first of all, there's product links that show up in conversations, in shopping conversations, and then there's ads. Product links are more about, we talked about this product, give me a card so I can click on it and I can shop that product directly, either on OpenAI or on that, the business's website. And for that, the businesses need to be ready. They need to integrate. There's like, the old SEO days, you need to create those product feeds and all of that. There's some technical aspects on how to do that. Those are not ads, right? That's just that's just a better user experience when talking about products with the LLMs. OpenAI says, their open statement is the fact that ads will never change the actual conversation, and the way they compile ads is going to be at the end. Okay, this is the response that we're going to give the user. Now, list ads related
Here
to
are some
whatever.
recommendations.
Yeah, some recommendations. This is what they say they're doing. Now they're a for-profit company. They're closed, even though their name is OpenAI. We don't know exactly what's happening behind the scene. I think that's why Claude is making a bit of fun of them, because who knows what they're going to recommend or not. But coming back to and that's one thing that I truly believe, I don't think they will ever show ads unrelated to the current conversation or the current brands mentioned in the conversation.
Okay.
So if you're a brand, if you don't show up, if you have low brand visibility, then you can create all the ads in the world. They're probably not going to show up. So again, I think visibility is very, very important there. But we'll see. We'll see how the whole ad ecosystem will continue. Funny enough, yesterday I was talking with my youngest son about Google and
How old is he?
he's 14.
Nice.
About Google and how there's so many ads in the Google search results, and he's like, "That's not true. There's no ads on Google search results." I'm like,
Oh.
I think something what's happening. He's like, well, my ad blocker filters everything out. I'm like,
Okay.
okay. So he lives in an ad-free world, which is nice.
That free world.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, it's just the beginning. My bet would be that everybody's going to add ads, right? Even Claude. I mean, they're just saying that for now, but the opportunity is going to be so big. There's so much money left on the table. But you have to build it in a way that, in a way that it doesn't influence the conversation. The second it influences the conversation, you lose trust. And trust is probably the hardest thing to gain back once you lose it. It's easy to get, but hard. Yeah, easy to lose.
So you won't be having 5% anymore. You
So
will be having
exactly
0.9.
Yeah. But what you can do is influence the conversation, right? And how do you influence the conversation? Through great content that you put out there, and then the LLMs read the content, and you're findable. You write it in a way that is easily ingestible by the LLMs. We talked about Wikipedia. That's a great format. Nobody writes articles like that.
True.
Right? So, changing a bit the way content is being created so that it's easy to be ingested by the LLMs, I think that's how you can influence that. So if you want to show up in the conversation, then...
Do you think that sorry for interrupting.
No worries.
So do you think that you can generate today with large language models content that it's not, you cannot identify that is generated by a large language model?
I'm sure it's possible. Yeah. But it's a process.
At a scalable fashion?
It's a process. The most basic tool that we have at our disposal is search and replace. That
M dashes.
long dashes and quotes and double quotes.
Yeah, I know that.
Yeah, but I think there's more to that. I think maybe using multiple models, maybe
to work together as a team on a piece of content.
Exactly. Maybe fine-tuning a model just for that. Probably that's like one of the easiest thing that you can do. Just fine-tune a model so that the content it generates is close to what a human would generate. Maybe giving it more structure, so instead of saying write an article about shirts, right? You'd give it a structure. Say, okay, this is how it needs to start. This is the middle. This is the end. These are the chapters.
This is the framework.
Yeah, exactly. Here are 5 other articles that I wrote manually. Get inspiration from that, from an editorial and style perspective, and then create something, right? Versus just giving it a very basic prompt. Yeah.
Nice. I think it's a very relevant question for a lot of people, as right now there is a huge debate about generating content with artificial intelligence or not, or what is the price for that you are paying.
Yeah.
So now, are you raising money right now?
Yes, we are.
Nice.
Yeah.
And is it open in the public, or is it
Not quite. No.
Not quite. Okay.
No. You can.
Good.
We can talk after.
We can talk after.
We can talk after. Okay.
I have one more question. Then, if you have one, just going back to ads. Yeah, I also saw recently the Coca-Cola versus Pepsi, and the reason why it triggered me when you were guys discussing, can I use LLMs in a way to influence bad image around competitors?
Bad image.
I mean,
if
detrimental.
Okay, so if a competitor, right? Let's say I'm Samsung, and I'm competing with Sony, and Sony writes an article on their website saying Samsung is really bad, but Sony is great. Right? How do you deal with that? I think it's a hard question because there's legal aspects. Some parts of the world that's not allowed. In the US, it is.
That's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, so comparative advertising. I think you need to put out content that is very much aligned with your values. Have a content strategy that is very coherent, easily digestible by the LLMs. And then if there's enough content that is very aligned, the LLM is going to prioritize that versus some other articles that are out there.
Did product reviews become much more important now?
Yes, definitely.
Like 10 times more important than previously?
Definitely more important. I don't know if 10 times or 20 or 5.
Previously it was a noise. It was a lot of noise. Now this noise gets distilled down.
So that's one thing that struck me, and I was not aware that this was the case. And I became aware just by looking at the data, right?
Yeah.
If you do research for a specific industry, a specific space, that is prone to product reviews, right? You will see, that's what I do all the time. I look at the citations, the sources, and I want to understand what are the top citations, top sources used by the LLMs to answer my questions. And if you look at that, you will see that product reviews product comparison, product directories, they're very much up there. So whenever somebody writes a blog post about top 20 laptops you should buy in 2026, the probability for that article to be picked up by the LLMs is much higher than anything else. So yes, that's definitely a thing. If you go through the APIs, you're not going to see those. That's
That's a different story.
That's a different story. Yes, yeah.
You know what you're talking about, so why? Because I don't know why it's a different story.
Because when you go when you go to OpenAI via the APIs, they tend to favor official sources. So my website, your website, competitors' website, government websites, and so on.
Compared to a blog or something.
Yes, yeah. And when I go through ChatGPT.com, it's going to favor this type of product comparison.
Regular research,
Yeah,
regular searches.
social media, yeah.
Okay.
Back when, you remember the days when Reddit was the #1 cited source
Yeah.
Yeah.
by ChatGPT. Well, if you went to ChatGPT via the APIs, there were 0 Reddit sources,
Reference. Okay.
references. So obviously the answer is going to be very different. So you can't rely on it if what you want to do is optimize for your brand. Yeah. But what's interesting is that, yes, so product comparison, product catalogs and all that, those become more and more valuable. The good news for marketers is that that's the type of content that you can usually buy with cash. Meaning you go to the product review website, you see the authors, you contact them, and you have them write a review that maybe they have a lot of reviews for laptops and your product, your LG, and somehow LG is never included in those reviews. Like, what's happening?
But
So
you can
reach
also
out to
poison.
them.
But you can also poison at the same time.
You can also poison, yeah. But I would focus more on the positive.
Yeah. Okay. So as I understand right now, for content writers, there is a huge opportunity in very long tail niche product comparison or product.
You're
reference.
calling it very long tail. I would say it's not very long tail. That's the whole thing. They surface very, very high.
When I was saying very long tail, meaning exactly like you said, it specialized to 2026.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And
yeah,
very long
yeah.
tail from this point
But
of view.
everybody does that. Like Trustpilot, everybody go to
Okay.
everybody does that. And then there's a new article that shows up. And you know why they do 2026? Because the LLMs, when they write the query to go search online,
They want to
they want
today.
They want new, and they
Yeah.
add the 2026 keyword in the query fanouts.
Yeah.
And if you don't have 2026 in your article, you're not going to show up.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Nice.
The companies that you are working or the type of service, have you ever seen them? This is a question from my area of field, HR. Do you see them using it for employer brand?
Yeah, but that's more. You are working in HR, so you know this space well. There are a number of tools already at your disposal, so that you understand more about you as an employer, right? You don't have. I wouldn't. Yes, you can go to ChatGPT.com, right? But ultimately, ChatGPT is going to get the data from, the known, the 4 or 5 different platforms where people go and complain about, bad interview experience,
Bad salary.
bad salaries,
Culture.
bad management, and so on, right? So that's where you need to focus anyway, right? What if you're going to point our platform at that space is going to just surface those specific
Solutions that you already know.
I would think you already know, right? But yeah,
It will be good to know.
I'm assuming you know.
Yeah, it will be good to know.
If you're any good
Yeah.
in your domain.
Any last question from your side?
So something from the beginning. In your house today, what did you not automatize yet?
Yet, as in something that I
It's
want
something
to do.
that you really want to, or your wife, or your product owner
The client.
is the client. Sorry.
Yeah, so at some point she came with request, which I implemented.
Applied.
Yeah. She was like, okay, if it starts raining,
Yeah.
I want the shades to
Roll down.
lowered, yes,
Yeah.
to roll down, so that she doesn't have to clean or somebody doesn't have to clean the windows after it rains. And I was like, okay, makes sense. Typed it in.
We
done.
miss a sensor.
No, it was fine. It was
Okay.
working, yeah. But then she came back and said, well, if the rain comes from the north side, I want the southern shades to stay open. I was like, okay, that's it. that's where we draw the line.
Nice.
The direction of the wind, take that into account, and because I didn't want to hard code the location of each shade in the house.
So that was the
mainly-
problem, not the fact that.
I mean, yeah, obviously it's doable.
Yeah.
But I was like, okay, I think we're good for now.
Nice.
Yeah,
good.
so that the security wise, that's also some areas where you have to be very, very careful. I mean, if somebody breaks into my system and turns the lights on, I don't really care.
Mhm.
But opening the house door or the garage door, that's a different story. So
So you have different levels of hardening.
yes, and backup, yes, and yeah.
You don't need to tell everything.
Just don't give ideas.
Yeah, because I mean, obviously all these protocols are
Open.
o-
They're relatively open.
relatively open. Yeah. So you want to make sure that you use the right level of security for the right type of you don't want to over-engineer, but you don't want to be prone to
To be able to be scanned easily.
yeah.
Yeah.
So on the note of ads that we were talking, I really love the moment when you pointed out towards your website. The only thing you forgot was, use this code for 5% discount. So thank you very much for everything you shared with us and for taking the time to join us.
Yeah.
It was a real pleasure.
Thank you.
I learned a lot. Thank you very much.
You're welcome. There's more. There's always more.
Thank you.
Yeah.